It's a Wednesday afternoon, early in the summer of 1979. The Queen Elizabeth II will soon depart from Southampton, England. She's westbound for New York with 1,800 passengers.
That's fine. Just hold it there. Look that way with a nice smile. Just hold it there, sir.
Well, wait till I get a haircut.
Okay, very good there. A nice big smile for us, okay? That's the idea, very good.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. The two of you together, are you?
Yes.
Fine.
Yeah.
Just come
Shall we
stand
come
together.
together?
Yeah,
Fine.
that way,
Excellent.
Fine. Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
way.
Right, let go everything aft. Let go everything aft.
All clear aft.
All clear aft, very good.
Romsey, take her away.
That's all I've gone aft and recovering.
All clear aft, Sergeant Jay.
Slow stern starboard, please.
Slow stern.
We're about to set sail upon the North Atlantic, a voyage through time as well as space. For all who travel on these waters can hear the lingering music of history. In war and peace, in hope and fear, millions have come this way before. In their minds and spirit, in their very souls, lay the destiny of America. The Queen Elizabeth II is the last of the superliners to sail the North Atlantic, keeping a great spirit and tradition alive. In their heyday, the superliners were the largest moving objects made by man. They remain the fastest and most luxurious passenger ships ever built.
Take a stern round now, Culshot and Romsey.
Full ahead, port.
We invite you to embark with us now to share one of the most colorful and adventurous confrontations of man and the sea. Westbound for New York, the Queen Elizabeth II begins the classic transatlantic voyage of some 3,100 miles.
And full ahead to...
Clearing local English waters, Captain Douglas Ridley gives his vessel her head. 110,000 horsepower is brought to bear upon a mass of 67,000 tons.
It's 28.02 this time, sir. It's for 9 o'clock arrival.
156 rev should be
156, yes, 156 exactly, sir. Yep.
right. We'll go up to 156 revolutions.
156 rev. Hello, work up to 156 revolutions, please.
There is no precise definition of a superliner, but the term is generally used only for the largest and fastest liners of this century, perhaps 24 ships in all. The QE2, launched in 1967, is probably the last superliner that will ever be built. One of the captains of the Queen Elizabeth II has remarked that nothing quite like this ship will exist again until large human colonies venture into space. The ship is an oasis of human comfort and culture, a world unto itself.
Good morning. With the following passenger, please contact the telephone exchange. Mr. Blanchard, of cabin 3048, of cabin 3048. Thank you.
To start with, do you like avocado pear? You know, it's avocado pear with a little shrimp, little lobster, little crab meat, a little caviar on the top.
Hello, Jacksonville. I've got one call for you. It's my serial 2. It's going to Kansas City.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The following passengers are requested to call now at the Bureau at the aft stairway on 2 deck to collect radio telegrams. Miss Nancy Meigs, cabin 4116. Mr. Lieberman, cabin 1046. Mr. and Mrs. Kleinheinz, cabin 1070.
John, start the engine, John.
418.
Fine.
Mr. and Mrs. Weitzman, cabin 1110.
It's all very dry, isn't it?
All dry, yeah.
Afternoon, Captain Secretary. Oh, yes, the captain is entertaining in his quarters tonight, 7:15.
Turn to right. Kick your heel, forward 2. Go.
Would all persons on 5, 6, 7 and 8 decks stand clear of the watertight doors?
These are about to be closed for testing purposes.
The sights and sounds, routines and traditions of life aboard QE2 are distilled from the experience of countless passenger ships for more than a century. Today, this way of life has all but vanished from the North Atlantic, but it still exists in vivid memory.
I was born in Scotland and came to the U.S. right after school. Of course, I was traveling then, third class, I'm sure, way down the bottom of the ship.
My mother was born in Ireland, so we wanted to take her home to see her old home there. I spent all my life waving handkerchiefs on the piers of New York to my family and saying hello to them and saying goodbye to them. So now I'm going to start moving.
Unfortunately, the way of the world today, there's never going to be another ship built like this.
And once the ship is gone, there's nothing left. You've got Jumbo Jet or Concorde, but what is there to replace the QE2?
I told her this would be the last chance she'll ever have to go on one of the famous Atlantic liners. And that when I'm dead and gone, she'll be left behind. She can tell her grandchildren all about it. The last ship seen across the Atlantic, because it is the last one. It seems to take me back over the years when all the ships were like this one. And it's like going home, really.
It began, one could say, here in Southampton, England, when the Mayflower sailed for the New World in 1620. By 1920, after 300 years, millions of immigrants had made the westward voyage. Most of them came from poverty, and their journey was fraught with discomfort and anxiety. But for many, the worst the Atlantic could offer was nothing compared to the terrors and insecurities they were leaving behind. hazards of the Atlantic were once described as a seasonal catalog from hell. But as ships grew larger and more powerful, an illusion of invulnerability flourished aboard them.
Pull ahead, sir.
Then came the fateful night of April 14th, 1912. The Titanic disaster, reenacted in a British film made in 1929. On her maiden voyage, the Titanic collided with an iceberg while sailing at high speed in calm seas. Over 1,500 lives were lost, and the tragedy established a respect for the dangers of the Atlantic that endures to this day. Aboard QE2, on this first day at sea, lifeboat drill is a test of passenger poise and good humor. Despite its serious overtones, the event is usually conducted in an atmosphere of good-natured confusion.
Now where do you go?
12. Just go around to the right here. Okay.
Line up front here, please. Check your jacket.
The lifeboat's upstairs.
The lifeboats, what happened is, we take it through the small room, up one deck by the G stairway, and to the double down room. The boats are then brought down to what we call an embarkation deck. And they're pulled into the ship's side, the big windows open, and you step in the boats from there.
Yes.
And then the boats are lowered down then.
Is it women and children first?
No.
That's
Okay.
it. Ready, aim, fire.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now jump.
Fog is a common hazard on the North Atlantic. Vigilance on the bridge is especially sharp in the vicinity of major ports and on fishing grounds where small vessels difficult to spot on radar may lie in QE2's path.
What do you make that range of that target to port now, Phil?
211 degrees.
Even with two officers scanning separate radars, Captain Ridley is rarely far away.
Although we have radar these days, the ultimate responsibility rests on the captain. You can't be very far away. You may get a target at very short notice, especially on the Grand Banks, these small fishermen. So you have to be literally within a few feet of what's going on. And as long as ships have been at sea, when you get a situation like this, the master is on the bridge.
It looks to be almost stationary.
Well, it's probably a fisherman then.
I think so, sir, from the size of the echo.
How close is it going to be?
Should be just over 3 miles, so he's opening quite nicely now, sir.
Right, okay, then let me know if you get another target.
Well, there's thank you.
There can be occasions when the entire Atlantic crossing is covered in fog. Apart from coming down and having a shower in the morning, you literally spend the whole day on the bridge with your meals brought up there and can spend the whole crossing doing this.
Your attention, please.
2 is in position 50 degrees, 30 minutes north, 90 degrees, 6
The Superliner has been aptly described as two separate institutions, a great ship traveling in company with a resort hotel. Their successful combination has made a transatlantic voyage, in image and in fact, an experience to be enjoyed. But for the majority of Atlantic passengers, this has not always been so. Well into this century, immigrants were by far the most numerous class of passengers, and also the least considered. Like inanimate pieces of cargo, they were carried in bulk from the old world to the gateways of the new. But Atlantic travel changed dramatically in 1921 when the United States severely limited immigration by law. The liners and the services they offered would never be the same. The great age of the tourist had come. A massive wave of American travelers set out to find culture and excitement on the grand European tour. There was a new spirit of competition and frivolity as liners vied for the favor of celebrities and the trade that followed them. New York Mayor Jimmy Walker, playwright George Bernard Shaw, Paulette Goddard and Charlie Chaplin, Cowboy Tom Mix, actor Robert Taylor, Maurice Chevalier warming up his American audience.
We start with the hat? All right, a smile or no smile?
Well, it up to you. You're not
the real schnozzle. I'm glad to see you. Oh, yes, sure. I had a very good trip on this boat. Very nice trip. A few days, it's been a little bit too much, yes. Beg your pardon, but no accident.
The 20s were fateful years for Atlantic liners. Ironically, the larger American ships failed to attract much of the booming American trade. Prohibition was observed aboard many major U.S. vessels, even on the open sea. But for the foreign lines, the new era of the freewheeling, hard-drinking American tourist was a bonanza. Designs were laid down for new liners, ships of unprecedented size and speed to attract this new class of traveler. Conceived before the Depression, the superliner Normandie was constructed during the early 1930s, a period of world economic collapse. To many, the colossal French liner seemed destined to be a commercial disaster. The most opulent ship ever built could not have been launched at a less auspicious time. Everything about her was novel, overscale, beyond precedent. At 79,000 tons, she was the largest object yet built and set in motion by man. The Normandie was sent down the ways in 1932. The ship was embellished with works of art and was considered in itself the supreme expression of the genius of France. After 3 years of decoration, fitting out, and testing, the Normandie makes her record-breaking maiden voyage to New York. For more than 20 years, the transatlantic speed record had been a British monopoly. Germany and Italy held the honor briefly, but this crossing, 2,971 miles at almost 30 knots, was an outright triumph for France and caused a sensation among speed-conscious Americans. In the lean days of the Depression, many paid a precious 50 cents for a tour aboard the ship. The sea had never witnessed such a palatial liner. She boasted a dining room longer than the Great Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, 2 swimming pools, a tennis court, a theater, and no less than 23 elevators. The Normandie would immediately capture the cream of the transatlantic trade. In Scotland, on the banks of the River Clyde, the skeleton of the only ship that could challenge the Normandie had lain unfinished for more than 2 years. Desolate and unnamed, she was known only by a number, 534. Caught in the Depression, the Cunard Line sought government loans to resume construction of its new ship. More than 3,000 workers stood idle until April 1934, when work began again. The new ship would eventually be named the Queen Mary. Completed in 1936, she would compete with the Normandie head-on.
Here she comes, England's pride and the glory of her merchant marine, the brand new $50 million Queen Mary. The Paramount News plane, with the veteran ace Charlie Stauffer at the controls and Urban Santone at the camera, is first to greet the great liner, still 50 miles at sea. It's only a little after dawn, and the Queen Mary is cracking down at 33 knots, the top speed of her voyage across. She didn't break the Normandie record, but the officers say they didn't think it wise to open up her engines full. Anytime they want, so the Englishmen say, they can take that record away. But today belongs to the Queen Mary. She is the guest of New York.
The so-called blue ribbon, symbolic of the fastest Atlantic crossings, would go eventually to the Queen Mary, although her speed advantage was slight. Questioned by reporters, the Mary's captain, Sir Edgar Britton, was refreshingly frank about Cunard's rivalry with the Normandie.
Our speed came up above our expectations, and everybody was very pleased with what the ship did.
Are you going to try for the blue ribbon, Captain?
Well, naturally, that's what we're out for. What did we build her for?
Hearts will glow with admiration when our new liner leaves the quay. And a name loved by the nation will give her charm and dignity. British labor gave its skill, and it's giving me a thrill. For I'm happy and gay, 'cause I'm sailing away. I booked my trip for the USA on the finest ship in the world, the Queen Mary. How'd you like to come with me? The ship is all British.
The Mary would endure for 31 years, a symbol of British pride and enterprise. To serve on her was an honor, and she inspired many young men to endure the difficult early years of a career at sea.
Again, I mean, in those days, I mean, a job was a job, and you know, you couldn't afford to lose it. You behaved yourself and did everything you were told to do, because there was probably 20 people waiting ashore to take your job as soon as you lost it.
£12 for my third year and £18 for my fourth year, which adds up to £60 for 4 years' work.
The biggest crime you could ever commit when I was a boy, an apprentice, if you missed a ship in those days, well, you were finished for life. Today we sit down and listen to the guy's explanation that the taxi's wheels fell off, or or the plane wings fell off, or something like that.
Joined another company, rather rough and ready freighter company. I had some pretty good experience running up and down the Indian coast, when the only difference between breakfast and dinner was that you had curry for both meals, but you had marmalade with your curry for breakfast and chutney with it for dinner. That was the only difference.
I can remember going down to Southampton docks, and I used to look up at the Queen Elizabeth and the Queen Mary, and there's this aura of mystery, because I wouldn't let
the waiter in my days, I mean, in first class, I only had to look after 4 people. So, you know, you were very attentive, and a passenger hadn't got to reach over the table for the salt and pepper, because I was there to pull it towards them.
Taxi, though, your shoes was there, your bow tie was on the bed, things like that, and you say, bring their suit out before they went to there and brush it down. You know, there's no, you could, those days are gone.
Aboard QE2 today, Staff Captain Alan Bennell contends with a rapidly changing world. He is responsible for the welfare and performance of the ship's crew.
We do have what we think is the greatest liner in the world, and it's up to everybody, or the more senior people on board, to encourage the new intake of men and women to think that this is their ship. Because of the demise of the great liners, most of the people before, there was a great romance attached to the sea. I think that romance has been on the decline over the years, and it's rather sort of hard to instill it again. How's the club these days?
Yeah, I'll just pop up so it's untidy.
Yeah, right, that'll be fine.
A few records everywhere.
Right, yeah. Nice to see you.
Almost 1,000 men and women, representing dozens of different occupations, run the ship. Many have little contact with passengers and live in small, unsuspected enclaves within the labyrinth below decks. The staff of the ship's laundry is exclusively male and exclusively Chinese. Besides the passengers' personal garments, it must cope with the ship's general requirements. Some 71,000 towels, 23,000 sheets, and 5,800 tablecloths are carried on a normal transatlantic crossing. The laundrymen prepare their own meals, the only crewmen to do so. Like the rest of the crew, their lives are much easier on westbound crossings. By the clock, the ship gains an extra hour every 24 as she races westward over 700 miles a day. Like the politician he must partially be, Captain Ridley will shake hands with every passenger who wishes to meet him.
Hi, Captain. You're just exactly what I expected on this beautiful ship.
Very few decline the honor.
We're from Dallas, Texas.
Dallas?
Yes.
Well, welcome aboard. Good evening. Good evening, sir.
Mr. and Mrs. Ovechia.
Good evening. Good evening, sir.
Perhaps more than any other factor, the quality of the food aboard has dictated the fortunes of the Superliners. Thus, Executive Chef John Bainbridge bears great responsibility and commands instant respect.
Let me just have a look at it. Let's have a look at that one. Well, that should be enough anyway. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. Hey, don't forget you'll be busy tomorrow night. Yeah. Full house. Be on the ball, eh? How's the kosher section today? All right?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah? What are they eating? Are they eating much?
No, not
enough. Not a lot.
Not enough.
No, not enough. How are we doing, Ian? All right? Yes, all right. What do you got? Artichokes tonight? Yeah. I suppose when I was young, I got fairly rapid promotion, as you would say, if you were in the services. Yeah, they're French. And I soon became a bit of a entrepreneur type. And my wife said, well, I hope you're not going to take any jobs which mean you're going to be away from home too long. Eventually, I became what they call a supervisory chef. In those days, we had 8 ships. I used to hop from one ship to the other, looking at food and menus and all the wherewithal. It's a kind of a traveling inspector, if you like. I remember I used to go from New York to Montreal on the old Albany, the old Hudson, Delaware train, you know, up the Hudson Valley. And I used to hop from New York to Malta and join a ship there. And probably I did more flying than anybody else in those days, too. But I became a bit of a boss, and it meant me being away more and more and more. And we launched the Ivernian Carmania, the Carmania and Franconia out of Florida and New York some years ago, simultaneously as cruise ships. And I was away from home about 3 months. And I went home on Christmas Eve, and I was home about 1 hour from London Airport and got a telephone call. I had to return to New York in the evening. Been away about 3 months. And my child was quite young then, my daughter. And my wife said, well, if you go, that's it. So I went, and my wife and I parted. Ever since then, we've been very good friends. She's married again, and she regularly calls on me. I live on my own. I live a very happy life. My daughter lives a very happy life. We're married, and we've all been very good friends. It's just that we're not married. Got all these things ready, Bill? How is it? All the things here.
Just a selection at random, Chef. Not on the menu.
Well, I'll just say 1 or 2 of them. Scallops. I'll just have a drop of that soup, Bill, just a... Here you are, just taste this soup. See what you think's wrong with it, right with it.
It's nice, isn't it?
All right, eh?
Yeah.
There are 4 dining rooms aboard QE2 of different sizes and character. When full, the ship will serve 8,500 meals a day, more than 40,000 on the Atlantic crossing. QE2 security officer Tug Wilson patrols the lower decks. Exotic stowaways and cat burglars belong mostly to fiction nowadays. Wilson usually confronts more mundane human vices with a British Bobby's philosophical demeanor.
If you think of this as a large town with 3,000 people in it, it's not only the crew we have trouble with, we may have trouble with passengers as well. And all we've got is a police force of 9 or 10 to maintain discipline. And we get crew members who fall out with each other like you do in any walk of life. You get a crew member who's drunk and falls downstairs with a little push from his friends. And if we can, if we prove assault, we just push him ashore.
In the last 60 years, much has changed aboard the liners. Gone are the so-called black gangs, wretched laborers who toiled in appalling noise and heat, feeding coal to fire the boilers. Upstairs, staid decorum once reigned, and card sharps preyed on the unwary. Now, everything's in the open. On the bridge, a satellite navigation system can instantly supply the ship's position as QE2 carves her way westward at a steady 28.5 knots. It's mid-voyage now, a period of rare charm for both passengers and crew. The strain of departure has faded, and the anxieties of arrival still seem far away. The life of a liner is relentless. Her work is never entirely done. Late at night, the atmosphere can be eerie. It sometimes seems that the few people who can be found are mere servants of a greater will, that the ship has somehow taken control of her own destiny. In some of the crew's bars, workers coming off the night shift begin to relax long after most passengers are off to bed. Once thousands worked the transatlantic superliners, but now these men are the last of their kind. Their future aboard QE2 is uncertain, and the more senior men especially prefer to talk of the good old days, and the not so good during the war. Beginning in 1939, the Atlantic Ocean became a battleground. Normal shipping was halted and protective convoys organized. But still, German U-boats took a terrible toll of Allied merchantmen. The uncompleted Queen Elizabeth, companion liner to the Queen Mary, was launched in Scotland before hostilities began. Willie Farmer, now Chief Engineer Officer of the QE2, remembers his assignment to the new and completely untested liner.
When I joined the ship, I hadn't been there a long time. I went to the Cunard office in Liverpool. I was taken out of a ship called Lancaster, and they said, "We want you to go to Scotland, to Clydebank." But he didn't say why. I said, well, what for? And they said, well, we can't tell you. So they said, but you no need to worry. All you need is a small case for the weekend. But in fact, it was 2.5 years later when I got back.
As the Elizabeth slipped out to sea on the morning of March 2nd, 1940, German bombers were poised to attack when she reached her assumed destination, Southampton. Instead, in a dramatic bid for safety, the Queen Elizabeth set sail at full speed for New York.
We had an escort of 6 destroyers, 3 either side, which we lost the first day. They couldn't possibly keep up with us. And then we arrived in New York. I think 2 days later, the destroyers staggered in, badly beaten, and had a hard time with the Atlantic. But the amazing thing was, not a thing went wrong. The engines, the boilers, nothing had really been tried and proven. And the Queen Elizabeth went through the war without practically any engineering problems at all.
Now, for a few weeks in 1940, the Normandie, Mary, and Elizabeth lay side by side in New York. Solemn, curious crowds were drawn to the refugee liners, whose silent inactivity was haunting evidence of the cataclysmic war sweeping Europe. When the United States entered the war, the Normandie was seized by the U.S. government, and conversion from liner to troop ship was begun. Just 6 years after her dazzling debut in New York, her famous trappings were frantically stripped away. On February 9th, 1942, the Normandie caught fire. Careless workmen started the blaze, and overzealous New York firemen only made matters worse. Firemen would pour so much water into the ship that the Normandie would capsize at her dock, a gutted and immobile ruin. The fate of the Normandie was a bitter blow to American morale and self-confidence, falling just 2 months after Pearl Harbor. And for the next year and a half, the Normandie would lie here as if on public display. She would be righted and in 1946 be sold for scrap. Their movements around the world shrouded in the deepest secrecy, the Queens Elizabeth and Mary performed logistic miracles during the war. Remodeled as troop ships, each could accommodate more than 15,000. In 1943, the Queen Mary carried 16,683 souls, the greatest number ever embarked on a single vessel. It was a novel and sometimes terrifying experience for hundreds of thousands of young Allied men and women. Many had never traveled on a ship before, nor even seen the ocean. Willie Farmer recalls conditions aboard the Queen Mary.
And 1 or 2 occasions we ran into quite considerable light flak, and there were always planes over, especially approaching the coast. And the noise sounded pretty dreadful. It would be transmitted down the ship, and they would all be down below, herded, thousands and thousands of them, locked up down there, and no possible hope of getting up to the top decks.
Both queens survived the war, apparently without serious incident. But according to a retired West German executive, Horst Kessler, the Queen Elizabeth had a very narrow escape from disaster in 1942. A U-boat commander during the war, Kessler's memory of a little-known incident is supported by his surviving shipmates from the submarine U-704.
Ja, wir waren auf der 6. Feindfahrt und hatten schon 1,5 Monate.
We had already spent 1.5 months on the Atlantic and had seen action several times. At the end of November, we were heading for our home port in France. The sea was very rough, as you would expect that time of the year. And we had very strong winds from the west, force 10.
Und starken Westwind 8 bis 10 in den Böen. Auf der Brücke waren
There were, as usual, 4 men on the bridge on lookout. They were all strapped in their positions so that they would not be washed overboard by the high seas. Simulated here with German footage from the Battle of the North Atlantic, Kessler's story continues. His lookouts cited what they described simply as a very big ship. While preparing his attack, Kessler reached the conclusion that the target could only be the liner Queen Elizabeth.
Ja, wenn man so ein großes Schiff zufällig
When purely by accident you have an enemy ship of that size in front of your torpedo tubes, you must understand, it is the absolute situation in the life of a U-boat captain.
Und in dem Moment treten alle Beweggründe, alle
At that moment, you put everything else in the background, and you have only one thought. What can I do most quickly to take maximum advantage of this lucky situation? Kessler fired 4 torpedoes. An explosion was heard, but the Queen Elizabeth was not hit. Probably Kessler's torpedoes detonated short of their target. In any case, a fateful moment had passed that might have significantly altered the course of the war.
Das dauerte nun einige Minuten.
A few minutes went by, and then came a report from the sound technician that we didn't like at all. The Queen Elizabeth's engines could be heard, the noise from the screws of the ship, and it became fainter and fainter. And of course, that meant that she was continuing on her course, getting further away. And naturally, it was hopeless to try to follow her. By war's end, the Queens Mary and Elizabeth had transported some 1.5 million troops and earned an eloquent tribute from Winston Churchill. He said, "The Queens challenged the fury of Hitlerism in the Battle of the Atlantic. Without their aid, the day of final victory must unquestionably have been postponed." It is the 5th and final day of the QE2's passage to New York. Whether she will continue on the North Atlantic in future years is a matter of some uncertainty. More and more vacation cruises are planned for her. Some old hands among the crew consider cruising a frivolous business for a great liner. But the trade has never been more profitable and popular.
You want to set, Joey? Yes, please.
Ambrose Light Tower, one of the most famous Atlantic checkpoints, marking the approach to New York Harbor. At this approximate position, a beacon has been maintained for more than 150 years. A New York pilot comes aboard to assist in harbor navigation, his presence required by law. On this day, New York tugboats are on strike, as well as the specialized pilots who normally supervise docking. For 5 days, life aboard has moved in rhythm with the sea. Now a more frenetic pace intrudes, and the age-old magic of the ocean voyage ends abruptly. Manhattan. QE2's arrival must be precisely calculated according to the tide. She eases cautiously into the Hudson River.
Dead slow ahead, starboard. Dead slow ahead, starboard.
Approaching the dock, the harbor pilot and the captain form a committee of two in charge of the ship. With tugs, docking would be routine. Without them, controlling the QE2 67,000 tons can be a nightmare.
Stop port!
Stop port.
Stop starboard! Stop starboard!
The situation has become awkward. A subsurface current forces QE2's bow ever closer to the dock while swinging her stern downriver.
Come on.
The first docking attempt is abandoned. Now, with only feet to spare, it's a question of whether the ship and the dock will make serious contact.
Slow ahead.
Slow ahead,
On the starboard engine.
Slow ahead, starboard only. Slow ahead, starboard.
The QE2's 296th voyage is over.
Finish with engines.
Hello, TCR. That's finished with engines now.
Well, we finally got it ready. Look, it was a little bit too early on the time.
Yeah, I know it was.
On the bridge, there's a sense of accomplishment and relief. But for the disembarking passengers, a cold shock lies in store. For 5 days, they've basked in tender, loving care. But this is New York.
While you're away, or do you have everything with you?
No, everything is here.
Everything is here.
I don't know where to go. See this man here. Why don't you get in your car and pull up to the people, huh? Hold it right there. Hold it right there. 65.
58.
You're full of bull. Yeah, you're full of bull.
Well, can you put the big one in the front, maybe? That one is very bulky.
Give me this. 81. 81.
58.
That's the best tip I got. Make it 17 cents.
Make it 17 cents.
Yeah. And an English penny.
In the era after the Second World War, European supremacy on the Atlantic was finally challenged. On her maiden voyage in 1952, the liner United States shattered all speed records, beating the Queen Mary's fastest time by 10 hours. It was the end of a cherished British monopoly, and some Americans couldn't resist rubbing it in.
I just want to tell you that it's been a wonderful trip on this United States. It was a great, great trip. That's a beautiful ship, and I understand the Cunard Line gave it a 21 torpedo salute when it came in today. We'll see you all, and that's enough for nothing. Thank you.
With elaborate ceremony, the Hales Trophy, offered to the fastest Atlantic liner, changed hands. Few realized that soon the distinction would seem as quaint as the trophy itself. For 2 decades after the war, the transatlantic business boomed. It was like the 20s all over again, and behind the scenes, great plans were made. The liner France was launched in 1960. She was intended to compete directly with the British Queens, and in the tradition of the Normandie, the ship was a study in elegance. Even as the France completed her maiden voyage, the era of the Atlantic superliner was coming swiftly to an end. Long heralded, the transatlantic airliner was finally coming of age. Propeller-driven planes steadily drew more passengers. Finally, the jetliner, faster, smoother, and cheaper, would capture the transatlantic business almost overnight. By the mid-60s, it was all over. For a few years, the Queens Mary and Elizabeth hung on. In many ways, time seemed to stand still aboard the liners. Almost empty sometimes, they sailed on with a certain grand momentum.
First lucky number. Blind 20, 2020. Blind 60, 60, 60. Shall we shake the bag? Shall we? All together, and you will shake the bag.
Here to the very last, an almost Victorian class system endured. At the top, a first-class suite costing $3,000 one way. Cabin class, smaller and deeper in the ship for some $300. And tourist, mostly young people sharing cabins at a rock-bottom fare. Offering luxury and leisure no one seemed to want, the Queens were losing millions of dollars a year. Finally, on May 8th, 1967, when both the Mary and Elizabeth were at sea, their captains simultaneously opened sealed letters and read them to their crews. Thus was announced the end for both ships. The Mary would go first, within a matter of months.
I'm always very sorry to see a very nice ship end its days, but it's inevitable, of course, that both ships and us have a time limit, and the day must come when we go. And this applies to ships as much as to human beings.
In September, the Queen Mary left New York for the last time. It was 31 years since she first arrived here on her maiden voyage. Today, the Queen Mary has become a museum in California. The Queen Elizabeth has long since been scrapped. And even the QE2, virtually alone on the Atlantic, has been losing money. One factor, of course, is the price of oil. Every 24 hours on the Atlantic, the QE2 burns $80,000 worth of fuel. The meter records intake not in gallons or liters, but in tons. Passengers on this last of the transatlantic superliners come with high expectations. To attract them, the style of the luxury liner must be maintained regardless of cost. But an all-out effort is being made to reduce unprofitable turnaround time in port.
We'll have to turn around this time in 6 hours, which is virtually the record the ship can do. And in that 6 hours, we'll take 4,500 tons of oil, 2,000 tons of water, and 85 tons of stores. Yes, we can do it, with the cooperation of the crew. And they know the situation that we're in, and they'll cooperate, and we'll do it.
Come on! Come on now!
For many of the QE2's crew, 5 days of hard work are now climaxed by 6 hours of greater effort. Especially for cabin attendants, there's barely time to peer out a porthole. Old-timers remember hilarious nights on the town in Manhattan, but those days are gone.
No, never get ashore. If I was young, I'd be very annoyed, but I'm pretty old, so I don't mind staying here.
The young and energetic may steal a couple of hours ashore, but before nightfall, the QE2 will sail again, a fugitive from modern economic realities, running for her very life.
Crew gangway to bridge, all clear. Bridge aft. Let go everything. Aye, aye.
Well, I'm not prepared to think about it being taken off service or changed. I haven't mentally even thought about it. I'm confident that we will keep running somehow or other.
These docks have greeted millions and seen millions wave goodbye. Now there is but one superliner that calls here, and often only a handful to bid her bon voyage. Once upon a time, an advertising slogan claimed that on a ship, getting there is half the fun. The words could not forestall the jet age, nor spare the superliners the twilight of their fame. And yet the phrase rings painfully true on a summer night as the great ship echoes with music and laughter, and the great Atlantic lies beyond.